their students, when they graduate from school, pay off those loans?
Yeah, that's a good question. So most schools have that information on their website. They could also look at the CSAC website, and we're going to show you things like the loan default rate, et cetera. And there's more than one place where you can find that information. And the reason it's important is because, you have to take it first with a little bit of a grain of salt, because the average at one particular school, may or may not impact, you directly. But if you're seeing schools that have, really high loan default rates and really low graduation rates, and that's not a good combination, because that means that students, are typically spending a lot of money and not necessarily getting a lot of value for that money. You see that, and I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but, with the private for-profit schools, sometimes that's an issue. They charge a lot of money, and we've seen in the past where some of the schools don't incorporate the best practices for their students. And we've seen a lot of them go out of business, so that's been really impactful. In fact, we're seeing, a whole other group of colleges going out of business here that just happened in the last couple of weeks. So, students have to be careful. So they have to look at that information, and I think it may not be the do-all, end-all for their decision-making, but, if they're sort of weighing apples to apples and they go, this school has a reasonable grad rate, and it looks like those students are finding jobs, then I'd rather go there than this other school that I'm considering that doesn't have as high scores.
Yeah, playing the comparison game is really important in the college process. And also, one thing to help our listeners, so there's a lot of financial aid forms like FAFSA, California DREAM Act, GPA verification form, the CSS profile. Can you briefly describe what those forms are and how can they find them? Because those are all little different types of forms that are used for financial aid.
Yeah, so in California, you have the two primary forms. You have the FAFSA, and you have the California DREAM Act application. So, the FAFSA, the students should consider that as one-stop shopping for financial aid. That's information. When you fill out that form, just like with the California DREAM Act application, that information will come to the state to give you consideration for state aid. For the FAFSA, it will also go to the feds to see if you're going to get a Pell Grant and how much. And then the information goes to the schools to see if you're going to qualify for any institutional aid. So, in other words, money that the school gives you directly. It'll also allow you to, Dreamers have a DREAM loan. FAFSA filers have some more options. The CSS profile is used by a lot of private colleges, and it asks for a lot more information than and some different information than the FAFSA does, for example. And so we find that mostly it's for private colleges. Not always, but typically it's for, we see it used for the more expensive private colleges to better assess the financial need of those students to be able to offer institutional help or other type of aid.
Right. So they want to find the FAFSA form, they go to FAFSA.gov, California DREAM Act for undocumented or dreamers. They could go to this CSAC.ca.gov website to get that application. GPA verification form. They just go to their high school counselor, and actually the high school will submit that electronically. So make sure they know your legal name and they have that right GPA based on your 10th and 11th and weighted grade, not including PE. And the CSS profile, they can get that through the College Board website, which is that same organization that does the SAT or AP exams that some private schools may use. Great.
Correct.
Great. And speaking of dreamers, so which are undocumented students and who maybe had 3 years of high school in California or high school graduates. There is the California DREAM Act. So dreamers or undocumented students can apply for financial aid in California. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And California is one of only a handful of states that offers, state aid state financial aid for undocumented students. Literally, I think we're one of 6 or 7, and so it's important. So if if you meet the criteria, people are going to hear AB 540 sort of bandied about, but that's, if you meet that criteria, then you're able to apply and get aid through the California DREAM Act application. Now, one good thing that's happened recently is that the eligibility has expanded to include things like community college, adult school. So there are some other things going on that have expanded the possibilities of being eligible to meet those requirements. So that will certainly open up the DREAM Act application and subsequent aid to a much larger group of students. But they should apply, and when in doubt, apply. Because if you're not exactly sure what your status is, apply with the DREAM Act application. There's some skip logic built into it. It'll ask you a series of questions to try to help you determine if you're eligible or if, in fact, you should be filling out the FAFSA.
Right. And also, whether you're undocumented or not, both for the FAFSA and the California DREAM Act will ask our males who are 18 or older that they have to register for selective services, right? So aren't they required to do that in order to get a financial aid?
Yeah, any male. So regardless of the application that they're filling out. For FAFSA filers, they can, on the actual application, check a box and they'll be automatically registered. That used to be a feature on the DREAM Act. Unfortunately, it's no longer on there. So that means that for undocumented students, they still have to register for selective service, but they're going to have to do it with a paper application, which they can either download or get at a post office. And they want to do that early because when you mail that in, you're going to receive a letter back, and the letter is going to indicate that you've registered for selective service. And sometimes the colleges will request, they'll do random verification of their students, and they're going to say, did you register for selective service? And, where's the proof? Well, someone who's done the FAFSA, for example, can go online and say, here it is. The DREAM Act student, because they don't have a social, can't do that. So they want to start early. They want to get that letter back. They want to keep that letter so they have it in the event that they're asked if they did, in fact, apply for the selective service.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize, if there's one hiccup, like you didn't apply for selective services or your name doesn't match your social security number or whatever it is, that stops the financial aid process. So you have to check those emails, make sure all your applications are in, because otherwise the colleges will not get the financial aid forms from the institute, from the organizations, whether through the CSS profile or through the federal government or the state government, until all of it is linked up. So another reason why to apply early on that. And a lot of these forms, like the CSS profile, FAFSA, California DREAM Act, they're all out in October. So wouldn't it be best for students to try to submit their applications October their senior year? Like I often tell students and parents and guardians, like you'll get a treat versus a trick if you could apply for financial aid by Halloween.
Well, that's very accurate. You should apply early, and it's for a number of reasons. Like you said, if there's a mistake, if there's something that needs to be fixed, there's plenty of time to do that, and that makes it certainly more stress-free than if you're applying right before the deadline and you're scrambling to try to get things done. And above and beyond that, the other compelling reason to apply early is you could be awarded a Cal Grant early. If you apply in October and your school has uploaded your GPA, which all public schools and public charters are now required to do, then as early as November, you're going to know if you have a Cal Grant. And while you may not know, all the aid that you're getting, you might only have estimates. And you may not know about institutional aid. If you know you have a Cal Grant, that's going to go a long way towards helping you make a decision about what school you can afford and, ultimately where you're going to go. So it's certainly beneficial to do it early. There's a lot of reasons to do it early.
Yeah, no, that's really important. And we talked a lot about Cal Grants. So can you tell our listeners all the different types of Cal Grants that are out there and how the income ceiling that our legislators vote on every year impacts some of the Cal Grants that get awarded?
Yeah, so Cal Grant, a lot of times students will actually get a Cal Grant for 4 years and they don't know what it is. They'll say, "Oh, I got the FAFSA," or "Oh, I got the," like, no, you got a Cal Grant. So a Cal Grant, it basically is money from the state of California that you can use for college. That's free. You don't have to pay it back. And that's all Cal Grants. And there are different Cal Grants. So, basically we have Cal Grants A, B, and C. And the one thing you need to remember is, when you apply with your application, the FAFSA or the DREAM Act, the system's going to determine, one, what you're eligible for, and it's going to give you the best Cal Grant that you're eligible to get. So it's not like you have the option to say, "Oh, I'd rather have this than this." There are some different factors and components that go into what Cal Grant you get. So, for example, the minimum GPA to get a Cal Grant is 2.0. But to get a Cal Grant A, you have to have a 3.0. So a Cal Grant A is typically for families whose incomes are higher. It's an award that will cover tuition and fees at 4-year institutes, so bachelor degree granting institutions. And, it's a very beneficial award, but you have to have a 3.0. A Cal Grant B typically is for lower income families. You have to have a minimum of 2.0 GPA. And it will, second, third, and fourth year also cover the tuition and fee portion, but it also provides a stipend amount that goes directly to the student for $1,672, or that's the current amount. And then we have a Cal Grant C. Cal Grant C is typically for students who, we don't see a lot of students coming out of high school that opt for the Cal Grant C or try to get it. It's for students who want to go directly into a vocational type training program that's not necessarily going to lead to a degree, but might lead to a certificate or a diploma, and to allow them to work in a number of different fields. The one thing I'll point out about the income ceilings and the GPA is if the family if the family has a higher income, it's really important to kind of know where you're at, because the student then knows that they have to have a 3.0 or higher to get aid. We see a lot of students who fall into what we call the no Cal Grant zone. So
right.
They have enough need to get a Cal Grant A, but they don't have a GPA that's high enough. And these kids get nothing. And sometimes literally it's like, one class that made the difference. They got a C instead of a B. So certainly, going into it, they need to kind of know how this works. They need to look at the income and asset ceilings and determine where they're at. And they have to remember that we're going to look at GPAs from the sophomore and junior year. So, they don't want to take that lightly.
No, and I've even known some students who went to summer school to remediate a grade, because if they take the exact same course again, you'll take that higher grade and not average it with that lower grade too. And that helps them to qualify for Cal Grant. So, if you don't know how to calculate that, please go ask your high school counselor to calculate that, because it's not your cumulative grade since 9th grade year. It's this 10th and 11th grade that just John mentioned. And it just been such a great resource for so many of our California residents and students to go to college. So I was hoping now in this segment we could go quickly over some frequently asked questions that many students through the years have asked me. Is that okay with you, John?
Of course.
All right. So here's some questions. If I'm paying for college on my own, do I need my parents' financial aid information?
Typically, yes. So if you're under 24, even if you're living on your own, generally speaking, you're going to have to provide the information from your biological parents. And that means that you're going to have to use their financial information. So we hear these kids say, well, I live on my own, I work, I'm not even in contact with my parents, or they don't pay anything. Why do I have to? Well, because that's the way that the law is written currently. Now, there are circumstances that the student can go to the financial aid office and say, I have this circumstance, and they might be considered independent for financial aid purposes, but generally speaking, yeah, you have to provide your parents' information.
Okay. All right. So you're going to need that information on there. And who do I see if I'm applying for Cal Grant? Like, who do I see in order to put in that application? Because I keep hearing it, but I only hear about FAFSA.
Well, so there is no specific application for Cal Grant. By filling out either the